I want to talk about goal setting for the next couple days, actually, particularly like the keys behind making good goals and actually achieving them, because it's dear to my heart, because I've struggled. I've struggled with achieving things that I'm super easy, massive, massive, incredible accomplishments, and then I've wondered why I haven't been able to achieve really small things that should be super simple. And I've learned a lot in that process, and this is really what I've learned and what it boils down to, which is that many of us are taught to ask for what we want, and many of us struggle to ask for what we want. So the first thing that many people struggle with is knowing what you want at all. And fair enough, that can be a really hard thing for people. I'm just seeing if I can see who's here. I cannot see to reveal comments and reactions. I can't see anything about who's here. So hopefully if you do have a comment, I'll be able to see it on my computer since I can't see it on the screen. But many of us struggle to know what we want. So that's the first challenge, right? Like, what do we actually want? What's our big vision? What actually do we want to achieve? What would make us happy? Like, that's question number one. And that's the majority of the work that I do with people. And then we get into the next part, which is where the rubber really meets the road, which is we spend a lot of time saying, okay, well, now that I know what I want, like, can I have that, please? I'd really like this. Do you think that's possible? Like, that's the energy that we bring to our goals and to the things that we want in our life. We bring this sort of asking energy, and we're taught, ask for what you want, ask and it's given, ask and you shall receive. The word is right there. But the really interesting thing is when we use the word ask in that context, what we're meaning is declare. Because there's a difference, there's an energetic difference between asking and declaring. Deciding, what I'm going to call deciding. So when you are in that space of, I know what I want this, maybe you want like, I don't know, $200 or something like, and then we think, okay, I want $200. Like, okay, universe, big whatever world, I want $200. Is that okay? Is that going to work out? Like, all right, I said it. I said what I wanted. I declared it. Like, pat me on the back. I'm going to tell people I want $200 by this date. And then we go about our lives sort of wondering if it's going to happen. Like, oh, is it going to happen today? Like, do you think it's going to happen? Do you think it'll happen? Do you think, and then it doesn't happen. And we use it as a reason to believe that we can't have the things we want, and we're never supported, and goals don't work for us, and, blah, 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 blah. Like, we build ourselves, we spiral ourselves downwards. But that's because we're in the energy of asking. We're not in the energy of saying, this is what I've decided is already going to happen. And then just assuming that it's going to happen and moving on with your life and taking the actions that you need to take to actually live with that. So let me give you an example. When I was working for the government, this is probably 2008, 2009, I was living in D.C. I had a house. The house was falling down. I mean, people talk about fixer-uppers. This was a terror downer. It was a disaster. It was a total disaster. I was way in over my head when I bought it. And I knew that I was unhappy. I was unhappy in my personal life. I was unhappy. I loved my job and I loved my friends. Like, I wasn't unhappy in that sense. I was unhappy on a soul level. I had achieved everything I ever dreamed of doing. I was one of those few people who actually achieved what they thought was their entire life goal, which led me to then figure out, well, what's my actual life purpose? Because I achieved what I thought was my life purpose. So I had this really, basically charmed life, but I had this horrible albatross of a house. And I needed out. And so here I was trying to figure my way out. And I'd gotten into self-development. I'd gotten into yoga, and I was doing all this work. And I'd go home at night and just sob. I mean, I had like a hole in my floor 3 feet across, 6 feet deep. My studs didn't actually reach the ground. I had no footing. It had been washed out after 100 years of damage and decay in the house. So basically the entire house, back half of the house, was hanging on its aluminum siding with no support and structural support. Every time you got into the shower, it was like taking your life in your hands because the whole tub might fall through the floor and you die. I mean, it was awful. It was awful. It smelled like termite damage. I mean, it was just awful. And so I would go home and think, I really want out of this situation, and cry. And I would think, this doesn't make sense. I'm a smart woman. I have great friends. I have, on and off relationships. And so you start negotiating, right? like, well, why can't I just find a man and then I'll get married and I won't have to live here anymore? Or why can't I just get paid more? And it's that darn government. It's my job. It won't give me a raise so that I can pay for repairs. Or life is just unfair. And, victim role was really big for me. Playing the victim was really, really big for me. It was one of my favorite roles, probably still is, next to, of course, like Wonderful, Gorgeous Woman, which is my favorite role. But playing a victim was like one of my top roles at the time. Now I can see it and laugh about it when I do it. But at that point, I was so heavily invested in playing the victim that anytime I would try to take action, I would just end up in the poor me state. So I would say what I wanted. I want my house to be fixed. I want to sell my house. I want my house to be fixed. But I wouldn't actually empower myself to do it. So I was in the asking mode. I was saying, well, this is what I want. Can my house just be fixed? Can I just be out from under this? Can I just not have this burden? Can somebody please help me? Can this please happen? And here's how I got out of that. So I'm sure you resonate with this, right? We've all been there at some point. Maybe for you, it's happening right now in your life or in your business. Or maybe it happens for you with food and your diet. Like, oh, I just wish I was thinner. I just wish I was more healthy. I wish I had more money. Like, I'd really love to make more money this week. I'd really love to have this experience happen to me. I'd really love to meet somebody. We talked about this last night. If you caught my live last night, talked about like that type of energy in relationships. I talked about love last night. So we've all been there in one way or another. And what I did and what made the difference and allowed me to then fix and sell my house was that there was a moment where I decided I am quitting my job. So not I'm stuck here and I have to keep working because I have to pay for this house and I can't leave my job until the house is fixed, and I can't pay for the house because I don't have enough money, and like I can't do this, which is how we spiral ourselves, right? Like, well, I can't do what I want because I have to pay for this bill, which means I have to go to this job and I have this issue, and so I have to keep doing this. Like, that's what we get ourselves stuck in life. So there was a moment where I decided, no, I am leaving my job. It's happening on this date. It was a year in the future. This date is the date that I'm leaving. Period. It was not, well, I'd love to quit my job if I could sell my house. So there's a little bit of doubt in there, right? I would love to do this if this happens. Seems like a totally innocuous statement, right? It seems reasonable, even. It seems rational, even. Well, of course, there's all sorts of things we'd love to do if this or that happened, if I had the money for this, if I had the time for that. There's lots of things we would love to do. But what that's doing is putting this tiny wedge of possibility that it's not going to happen. It means that you're waiting for somebody to gift something to you instead of deciding that you're going to go and do it or take it or be it. So when I said to myself before this decision, well, I'd love to quit my job if, I didn't have this house. Those are all like wishing statements. They're all asking statements. Like, yeah, I've said what I want. I want to quit my job. I'd love to be doing something different. I'd love to sell my house. Those are all clear, like, I know what I want, but I'm asking for it. Like, could you gift that to me? Like, I'd love to do this. If this happens, could you make that happen? It's like we're taking our power and we're putting it into some mystery force outside of ourselves and hoping that that's going to mean something, hoping that that's going to make something happen for us. And that's not how we achieve goals. That's not how we actually get what we want. So the difference is that we go from that, like, oh, it would be nice if, and I'm happy to do that when and if, to this is going to happen, I have decided, and then we move out of the way and let it happen. So I talked about this last night in terms of relationships, that when I started dating, I went into it with the view of I've already won. I know I'm going to end up with somebody, and it's going to be great. So now it's just a matter of time and numbers and meeting people and like getting out there. But I've already determined that I'm going to win in this situation. And it was the same thing with my house. When I decided I was going to quit my job, yeah, exactly, Nikki. When I decided I was going to quit my job, then all of the things that I was sitting there pathetically crying over for years, and I literally mean years that I spent with that house, being so frustrated on, like, it just started happening, right? There was no logical, it's all about giving over our power away. Literally, we have our own power Yes, we have to have it before things can happen. And this is where we get stuck. So we know what we want to happen, but we're still doubting that it's possible for us. So we could get really deep into the self-worth of this, because at the end of the day, this is a self-worth issue. But it's also what my friend Mike Aimelli is referring to as agency, but it's a responsibility issue. Are we putting the responsibility for it happening on us, or are we putting it on something else? Like, are we letting God or the universe or source decide whether or not we're going to make a certain amount of money? Or did we decide we're going to make a certain amount of money? Because if we're putting it on somebody else, then we're doubting whether or not we're worthy. We're doubting whether or not it's possible for us. We're doubting whether or not we're capable. We're like looking for somebody to bequeath us with what we want so that we feel approved of. And you may or may not resonate with that, but really underneath it, that's what's happening. And it's particularly happening in women, but it happens in men too. Almost all of the women in my current masterminds and previous masterminds, this is what we're struggling with, right? We know what we want. We know how we want to feel. We know how we want to be in the world. And we're not willing to stand up and say it because we're waiting for somebody else to pat us on the back and be like, you're okay. I'm going to give you that to prove that you're okay. And now it's good. Now you can go and do all of that. Right? Now you can go and be that person because we've approved of you. Like we're waiting for permission. But it doesn't actually work that way. It works the opposite. And it was funny because I had a lot of trouble getting my head around this in business, but I used it repeatedly, in my life previously. And my house was one example. So I had this, horrible, miserable, falling down house that I would sob over and feel so trapped by. But as soon as I decided that I was quitting my job a year later, things that were illogical started happening. Like I found one of the best contractors in the city who, for no logical reason, was very affordable and willing to work only on my house. Like super nice guy, just really, it doesn't even make sense. It does not compute, Or the way that my house sold, I didn't even list it. Somebody who'd seen my house thought it was absolutely horrible, refused to even work on it, randomly told his friends who went to see, there's no logic to how things work out. But of course they were going to work out because I'd already decided and I'd already set the date. And there was no wiggle room there. There was no wiggle room. It just was happening. And I took action as if it was happening. I started house sitting to get with my transition plan. Like I had to keep working for a few months after I sold my house. I started house sitting to build up a reputation so I would always have somewhere to live. And then house sit overseas, which I did for a few years. I started doing that before I sold my house because I knew it was going to sell. So, I took all of this action on just the decision, the assumption that of course this is going to happen. I decided it. It was the same thing with my government career. There was no logical rhyme or reason why I got to do everything I ever wanted to and start my own office and, basically bend the will of a 220,000 person organization to do exactly what I wanted it to, other than the fact that I just decided it was going to happen. Like this was the right thing to do for the country. This is what we were going to do, and that's all there was to it. Like everyone was powerless against this, powerless against it. I remember my bosses going, I don't even understand what's happening here. Like, how do you at this level have no bosses and all of this money and you're just like doing all of these things? And I was like, I don't know. I just decided it was going to happen and that's all there is to it. So if you're in a position right now where, let me think of an example. There's so many of the women in my mastermind group. This is exactly what we work on. We say that we know what we want. And then we're sort of tiptoeing around waiting for a little sign that we have permission to do it. But we need to move into the energy of deciding and declaring in order to make it happen. And Abraham Hicks, if you follow them, has a really great example of this. They talk about driving in Arizona to California, but since I'm not familiar with Arizona geography, I'm going to give you an example that I do know. So if I was going to drive from Buffalo, New York, to Chicago, the midway point is Cleveland, Ohio, where I'm from-ish. Near there. So this is an Abraham Hicks example. If you got in the car, oh yeah, thanks, Shauna. Well, you know the energy of decision. So if we got in the car in Buffalo and we were going to drive west to Chicago, this is an Abraham Hicks example that I just love, but with different cities. We wouldn't doubt it, right? We'd get to Cleveland, Ohio, and we'd be like, yep, halfway, here we go. Not Chicago yet, but I'm halfway, so let's keep going. But what happens is in life, that's the decision. We know we're going to Chicago. We realize that there's a midway point. We realize there's stuff that's between us and Chicago, but we're still on the path to Chicago. We're not doubting that we're on the path to Chicago. But what happens in life is that we say, okay, well, I want this. I want $500. And because it's not a clear linear path, and because we don't have a map that shows us all the points along the way, we get to the metaphorical Cleveland and we're like, I just don't think that this is happening for me. I'm not sure I'm actually going to get to Chicago, so I guess I'm going to just turn around. Maybe I'll stop. Maybe I'll go south instead. Like we have this huge amount of doubt, and I've heard Abraham Hicks use this example over and over and over, and I truly didn't get it until recently when I started thinking about the energy of asking versus deciding, and particularly around our goals and what we want. And I think that's really what they're getting at, right? Is that we can't see the metaphorical map. There is no clear, this is the step in the right direction. It's firmly and fully based on trust that you have made the choice, and that is going to happen no matter what. It may show up differently. It may show up decades later. The lesson, the essence of what you want may show up instead of what you think you want, because sometimes it's the essence that matters. So those are things like unanswered prayers. You know, we really wish for like a deep and abiding love with our high school sweetheart, and then it doesn't work out, but we get deep and abiding love anyway. You know, and we're like, oh, thank God that didn't work out that way. So, you know, we get what we decide that is going to happen for us. But when we start to wiggle and wobble in the middle, when we start to doubt about whether or not we're worthy of it, when we start to doubt that we're capable of accepting it, capable of receiving it, that we are allowed to have it. Permission is a really, really big one. Am I allowed to have this? Am I allowed to be this way? Am I going to get yelled at? Am I going to get knocked down? Am I going to get called selfish? Am I going to get called this? You know, all of those things are what happen when we metaphorically get to Cleveland and freak out. So we need to really commit to whether or not we're going to Chicago. And if you just joined, you're like, what are we talking about? But listen to the example again. So the energy of decision is the energy that moves everything. Like I said with my house, there was no logical reason I would have this incredible contractor at the price that I had him. There was no logical reason why I'd get a call out of the blue and somebody would just randomly sell my house for me without ever listing it. Like there's no logical reason for the things that happened, but other than I made a decision, and so of course, it doesn't matter how it happens, right? I just knew it would. I just knew it would. And it was the same thing with my government career. I knew exactly what I wanted, and it was going to happen. And it was the same thing with my relationship. I knew I was going to win. I am going to win, because it's not over yet, right? Like, I know I'm going to win. I know I'm going to have beautiful, loving experience in my life, beautiful love in my life, and so it is. That's that other phrase that we might have heard a lot, right? And so it is. And so that's the decision energy, which is very, very different than looking for life to prove to us that we're on the right track and that we're worthy of getting what we want. Thank you for the hearts. These are really cool. I don't think I've seen hearts before. Maybe not consistently. So thank you. So, you know, think about something that you want right now, and that you know that you want, and you said that you want, but there's still a wobble in it. And wobbling, again, is another Abraham Hicks phrase, but I really like the description of it because we can feel it, right? We're like, I don't know if it's happening for me. It's like a bowling pin that like isn't quite sure if it's going to fall, and we're all like, is it going to fall? You know, that's not where we want to be. That's the energy of asking. So if you want to achieve a goal, we have to make the decision that the goal is not negotiable. The goal is happening, period. Or the essence of the goal, or the intention of the goal. You know, we have to be a little bit open to interpretation for the best message coming through. Somebody just sent me a message to say, love you speaking your truth. Thank you for messaging me. So, you know, we need to really look at ourselves and see what space we're coming at things from. Are we looking for life to prove something to us? Because it's not your business's job. Somebody said this to me the other day and it really sunk in, or I heard it on a live and it sunk in. It's not money's job to prove that I'm successful. It's not money's job to make me feel like I'm a good person. It's not money's job to make me feel like I have self-esteem. It's not my business's job to prove that I have a value to offer in the world. Like, those are all decisions that you make, and then success, Business, money, contacts, those are just markers along the path to something you've already decided. They're not things that give you permission. Am I looking for life to prove something? Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Shauna, for writing that out. Yeah. So when you're looking at your goals, check in with them and see, am I asking for this goal or did I decide on this goal? And there's no shame in this, right? Because sometimes you look at a goal and you're like, that is the asking energy, and I'm actually not ready to claim that for whatever reason. So then we look at, well, maybe I can claim something around it. Maybe I can claim something smaller. So if we say like, oh, I want to be a millionaire, and you look at that and we're like, I'm not ready to claim that. Well, but maybe we're ready to claim I have consistent income so I feel stable and safe and secure in my life. Maybe we're ready to claim that, or maybe we're not ready to claim like, I'm going to be married and have 20 children, but we're ready to claim I'm open to love. So those are vaguer examples, that last one. But really, really be honest with yourself, because there's no shame in not holding the energy of decision, but it's a waste of time to keep pretending that you've decided for something that you're actually using sort of to punish yourself. Because when we're in the energy of asking and we're putting this little bit of, or perhaps a lot of it, like the onus of proving it on something outside of ourselves, then what that's really doing is tearing us down. It's destroying our self-esteem, because then we're constantly looking at the outcomes in our lives and using the lack of outcome to prove that we're not good enough. And that's way more damaging than realizing actually that you're not ready to commit and decide on something that you want, and then letting it go, or committing to something around it but that feels more in line with where you are. Nikki says, claiming it, very powerful. Identify what you want and claim it. Yeah. That's the funny part, Nikki. Thanks for saying that. Like, I've heard this over and over, right? Like, amazing people, teachers that I've worked with, I just mess up her name every time, but Natalie Guerin, she talks a lot about this, like, decide. Just decide. But I think she calls it declare. Like, declare to the universe what you want. And she's a manifestation teacher. And I've heard a lot of people talk about that, but I didn't really get it for some reason until recently. It all came around when I was looking back on my own story, and I was like, oh, well, that's how I sold my house. Of course, I just decided I was going to. It took a year. It took a year of effort, but I decided I was going to. And the only difference between sobbing, pathetic victim me and me working on my house that was still the same crappy house, circumstances have not changed, right? Same hole in the floor, same studs that don't reach the wall, same nasty smell, same awful house. Like, the circumstances of my life had not changed at all. But the difference was, instead of sobbing, wishing I could get out of it, looking for people to save me, wondering how I got into it, wondering why I had to be here, why do I have to suffer, blah, 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 like all like the poor me stuff, I had just decided, well, I'm going to do this, quit my job on this date, so I better not have a house by then so that I have to pay for, because I'm not going to have a salary. And that was that. So, and everything worked out. Of course, there's lots of details in there, but what I'm trying to say is the details aren't important. That's the getting to Cleveland part, right? Like, just decide you're going to Chicago, and who cares if it takes you through Nashville or if you drive straight through Cleveland. Like, that part doesn't matter, because we're not questioning the route. We're not questioning the route. We're staying focused on the destination. Like, we just need to stop questioning the route. But what happens is, for most of us, is that we're actually questioning the destination. Because we're like, oh, I'm not sure I'm worthy of going to Chicago. Like, I'm just not sure that I'm ever going to get to Chicago, because I'm not sure that I've really earned it. And, I guess once I get to Chicago, I'll feel like I'm a chosen person who gets what they want, and it'll really make me feel more confident once I get to Chicago. But I'm just not sure I'm meant to be in Chicago, because I'm not like the Chicagoans. I mean, those Chicagoans, jeez. Have you seen them? I don't know if I'm one of them. But once I'm there, then I'll know that I really belong. I mean, like, that's what we're doing with our goals, right? Especially for those of us in business, you're probably like, oh yeah, I'm doing that. So really look at your goals. Hopefully you've written down the things that you want, or maybe you have a vision board. Look at them and see how it actually feels. Is there a little bit of like, pretty please, wouldn't that be nice? I'm going to feel good about myself once I have that. Or is it like, yeah, that's happening? Because the things that are still the pretty please, won't that be nice, that's going to make me feel good about myself once I have it, that's just damaging you right now. it's continually victimizing you by putting you in an energetic position that you're waiting for something else to gift you what you want. And the things that you're like, oh yeah, that's going to happen. Like, that's the energy we want to be in, and it's better to focus on those things and let go of the other desires for now and just like hammer through the things that you really feel clear that you're going to get and watch them happen, because that builds your confidence, whereas the other ones destroy confidence. Or look at those things that you have that asking energy around and see where you can make clear decisions around them. So maybe you're not ready to decide on the whole thing absolutely and really embrace that, but maybe you can decide on a small step towards it, or maybe you can decide on an aspect of yourself in it. So I don't know exactly what your goals are, but we gave a few examples earlier on that. So hopefully that's helpful, but I really want to call out this difference between the asking and the decision energy, because it's something I heard said over and over and over and over, and I didn't really get it until I was looking back on my own history and looking at the places where I'd succeeded as if by miracle, because they were, right? As Abraham Hicks says, you have the power to create worlds once you decide. And that's what happened with my house. That's what happened with my first career. That's what happened with my relationship. Once I was 100% in the energy of like, of course this is going to happen, the entire world bent to my will in miraculous ways that we could never logically explain. And that's really, it's not effortful, right? We're still doing action, but it's no more effort action than it would be if we hadn't made that decision. Like when I decided I was going to win and be in a loving partnership, I didn't have to I was still going on dates. Like the effort of the date was no different than the effort of the date if I'd been insecure and waiting for the date to prove to me that I was worthwhile. Like, it's still a date. There's no difference in the effort level. It's just that one flowed much more easily and got me to a place where I wanted to go, and had a lot of momentum behind it. Whereas if you go in with the asking energy, then we're basically spinning our wheels because we're constantly looking outside of ourselves and not building on anything because we haven't decided. So I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in. Even if you type them in afterwards, I'll still see them. Hopefully Facebook will let me know that you typed something in. But yeah, it doesn't matter what context you apply this to. Career, personal life, finances, love, business, it really doesn't matter. What matters is that you stop victimizing yourself by asking and hoping and dreaming for what you want, and just decide whether or not it's actually going to happen. Do you think you're worthy of it? Do you think you're capable of it? Do you think it's possible for somebody like you? Because we all have that in our heads, right? Like, oh, well, it's possible for Julia Roberts, but it's not possible for somebody like me. Like, oh, the three least favorite words when they go together. Somebody like me, you know? So really deciding, like, is what you want possible for somebody like you? Because if it is, great. Then there's no wiggle room there. We don't need to ask for permission. We don't need to ask, God to gift it to you. You just decided. Of course we can be grateful. Of course we can be humble. Of course we can be, filled with blessings and thankfulness and like blown away by the miraculous nature that these things come around, because there's still room in our lives for miracles. There's still room in our lives for wonder and magic and just awe of life and how it works. But we get an opportunity to shape that and point in the direction, right? So we point at Chicago, and then we just get blown away on the way there about all the amazing things that happened and lined up perfectly and helped support us and helped us become the people who that when we got to Chicago could really be like, whoa, I'm in Chicago, because maybe we had some growing to do along the way. I'm so glad, Nikki. So glad. Thank you for being here and sparking such good conversation and so many good angles with this. So, we're grateful for the process along the way. We're grateful for who it turns us into, because that's why we want things, right? We want things because of what we think they're going to mean about who we are. And we need to decide about who we've decided to be. Not, I'm going to be happy if, or maybe I'll be happy when, or this will prove that I'm worthwhile because, we get rid of that and we just say, this is who I've decided to be. This is what I've attached to that. And then we go for it. We just go for it because the action is no less or more. It just is more inspired because we've already decided. So awesome. Thank you. Leave your comments. This was super helpful. I want to do like, I shouldn't even be saying this. Somebody just paid me a lot of money to teach their staff this. But, oh well, we're going to do it here. I would love to do a breakdown of common goals, like how we set goals and why they don't work, and what to do instead, and really like break it down in a live workshop. I'm sure people have done that before. I probably shouldn't do things that people pay me for on here, but this is really, really big. And so deciding is one of the key pieces. It's actually like the forerunner to being able to even think about goals is, are we willing to decide and choose? So hopefully this is really helpful. Go back through your goal list, go back through the things that you think that you want, your vision board, the things that you've said that you want, and just check in with the energy. Is it possible for somebody like you? Do you believe that it's possible? Do you believe that it's going to happen? Absolutely 100%. And if not, then either let it go for now or find something related to it that you can believe. So if you don't believe you can be a millionaire, maybe you believe that you can make $500. If you don't, or something like that. Like ramp it down to a place where it's so obvious that you're like, of course that's going to happen, because that's where we build confidence. And then we go and do that. And then we just change what we think is obvious. We just change what we think is a no-brainer. And it doesn't matter if that dream is massive or little. This is where we get into, where people say like, it doesn't take any more energy to dream big, like dream bigger, because sometimes we get stuck with the small things. So I'm not saying choose small goals. I'm saying choose goals that you energetically resonate with and have decided are possible, because the decision matters more than anything else. That declaration of this is happening matters more than anything else. Like when I went into the government and decided that I wanted to work on world peace and, do this massive, massive effort and create this huge thing, like that wasn't a tiny goal. It wasn't a tiny goal. It was a massive goal. It was a massive goal that was completely unfounded with anything that had previously happened. But that's okay. That's what I decided. So I'm not saying you have to choose something small. I'm just saying choose something that you absolutely believe is possible. And then we'll make it happen. Okay. Talk to you soon. Mwah.